Hello and welcome back. So now, if you've noticed, these ships can walk out of the screen, but the player can't. So we gotta fix that. We have to make sure that they can't leave the boundaries. So let's go ahead and open the enemy controller script, and we can do the same thing we did with the player character, where we got a reference to the map limits class as limits, and then we just constrained his position to those limits. So let's go ahead and copy this code here from the player character, and we can just paste it into the enemy controller script in the update method here. But now it won't work. That's because we need to get a reference to map limits and make sure to call this variable the same as we called it here, or else it won't work. And now our invaders will have these limits here. And let's just go ahead and copy the limits from the player. They're basically the same. So let me just see. It's minus 18, 18 minus 10, and 10. So let's go ahead and minus 18, 18. I'm going to, so y for the player is 10 and minus 10 up there, but I'm not going to set it minus 10 for them because they might spawn further up. So let's set this to minus 20 and maximum y to 20. And let me just, can I copy the limits? I can't, no problem. And minus 20, 20. Minus 18. Okay. That should be fine now. And if I go ahead and increase the speed of one of the invaders here, we can see that they in fact do stop at the boundaries. But they still continue moving downwards or down when they stop. They are still game objects in the game, but we can't kill them. So let's go ahead and on the prefabs here add a component. Let's add the def timer that we made. And let's just set the timer to these guys to be 5. I'm going to leave the particle out of here. And let's add the def timer to all of those guys. Let's set it to me. Actually, let's set it, 5 is good enough. So 5 seconds for them to be alive. And now if I run this, and when they walk out of the screen, you can see that after 5 seconds, they will be dead. So that's great. Okay, let's now create a game object that is going to be spawning these guys. So let's create a new empty, and I'm just going to reset the position of this object, and it's just going to be a just going to be an invisible game object that's going to be spawning these enemies on set coordinates. So let's go ahead and in our scripts folder create a new C# script, call it game controller. Let's open it up now. Okay. Reload all. And let's also here get the reference to map limits and call it again limits. And now if I put the script, the game controller on the, let's call the game object also game controller game object. Let me just reload the script here. Okay. Now we again have limits, and I'm going to set the minimum x to maybe minus 15 and the maximum to 15. And the minimum y minus 20 and maximum minus 90, because I will be spawning enemies on these positions. And also now we need to reference the enemies that we want to spawn. So let's open this script and let's get a public game object. Whoops, game object enemy 1, public game object enemy 2, public game object enemy 3. Okay, we can now fill these up with our prefabs. So let's drop our invaders here in these slots. And now I can basically say in void start, I can say instantiate, and I want to instantiate the enemy one game object, and the transform position that I wanted to instantiate, it's going to be a new vector tree. And for the x of the vector tree, I'm going to say limits dot x. Actually, I'm going to say random dot range. So I'm going to get a random range from limits dot x dot minimum x to limits dot maximum x. So our x value is going to be a random value of the minimum limits minimum x and limits maximum x. And then for our y, I'm also going to say random dot range, but this time we will say limits dot minimum y and limits dot maximum y. Okay, and for the z, just set it to 0. Okay, we are missing 0, and here we need the rotation, so transform dot rotation. So this is a big line of code. Let me zoom out so you can see it. I'm just going to segment it into different lines. So instantiate first line the object that we want to create, then the second line is going to be the position at which we want to spawn. So basically a new vector tree, so a new x, y, and z coordinate. And for the x, we get a random range from the limits minimum x to limits maximum x, which is in our case going to be, let me just show you here, -15 and 15. Then we get a random number for y, which ranges from minimum y to maximum y, which is in our case -20 or -19. And then we set z to be 0, and then we set the transform dot rotation to be the same as the game object. So let's go ahead and let me just remove these from the scene. And now if I run the game, you can see we got a invader clone here, and he's moving really slowly and he got destroyed. That's because we spawned the prefab, and the speed here is set to really slow, so let's just set it to 500 and set the change timer to maybe 4, and let's enable health switch. Now if we enable this, we can see the invader clone did spawn, but he's walking in a weird path. That's because we got the rotation from this game object. We need to get the rotation from the enemy one game object. Okay, so he spawned under for some reason. I think we just missed our y position. Let me just see if I drag the player up. Oh, y needs to be positive instead of negative. Sorry about that, that's my mistake. Okay, save that and let's run the game now. And you can see now our guy just spawned and is attacking us. But this way, only when the game starts, we only spawn one enemy, and nothing happens anymore. Well, we just set things up, and in the next lecture we will build upon this script, so we make it that it spawns multiple enemies and it has a different timer for different enemies. You'll see. Thank you for watching, and we'll continue in the next lecture.